Hello, I'm Bob the Booker and welcome to my channel. And today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the books that I've been reading this week. I hope you're all having a really good one. Briefly having a moment of sunshine here, so taking advantage of that to film now before it starts raining again, inevitably. But yes, I'm going to talk about the books I've read this week and I hope you are doing really well yourselves. So first up, one of two memoirs I'm going to be speaking about today that are not out just yet, but will be fairly soon after this video. The first of them being On the Boardwalk by Martin Sherman. So Martin Sherman, the playwright famously known for the play Bent, which I've not yet read or seen, but I have reserved it from my library after having read this book. So On the Boardwalk is his memoir talking about all of the things that lead up basically to Bent being performed. And he talks a lot about his family in this, and particularly he has a very strained relationship with his father, who is an incredibly narcissistic man, incredibly convinced that he can persuade anybody of anything. He works as a lawyer, and there's a real thing of how he brings in this sort of theatrical way of speaking into his day-to-day life, of everything being an argument that you have to win and win people over with. And with that as well, he also talks about his identity as a young Jewish man who's also gay in the US, and particularly New York for a lot of this book as well, and Philadelphia, where he's from. Well, he's from just outside Philadelphia, but he spends a lot of time in Philadelphia. And so we get this really interesting story of this man essentially trying to work out who he is with the background of everything else, and him appearing as this playwright and dramaturg and all of these other things, all alongside everything else going on. And he talks at length as well about the perceived frailty of him as a person. So his parents, well, particularly his mum, suffers from Huntington's disease, and there's a very strong genetic element to it, but very much a sense of if you get to about 30 or 40 and you haven't really started developing it yet, you might be fine. And so he spends so much of his life in this constant state of worry of thinking, well, it hasn't hit me yet, but it could do anytime soon. And so he's very aware that he's not the kind of ideal man, quote unquote, because, you know, he's this sort of thin, fairly rakish gay man who writes plays and is obsessed with the theatre. And everyone around him is maybe expecting more of this sort of masculine thing, and particularly his father is expecting that, seemingly. So there's this very complicated relationship there. But I found this really interesting just for getting into the mind of somebody who has created theatre, and particularly somebody who would have been there in the real moments of certain plays and productions and actors coming up. He talks about working with Ciarán McKellen, with Meryl Streep, with various other people. And so although there is some sort of name dropping in some ways, it's all very much from a sense of somebody in the field working on those things. And I found that really, really interesting. Next up, in a similar vein, actually, Jodie Harsh with You Had to Be There. And this is a memoir of a similar and very different kind in many ways. So Jodie Harsh, drag queen, DJ, performer, lots of other things, but particularly really involved in the UK queer club scene. And it's so interesting to read a memoir from Jodie, because I remember hearing Jodie's name tons when I was first going out into like bars or clubs or whatever, and still now, you know, Jodie's a really big fixture. But this book talks a lot about Jodie as Jay, as a young man, and the way that they kind of came up and were sort of growing up, and his sort of feelings basically around that he was this young boy obsessed with going out, and very quickly really wanted to be involved in the big glitz and glam of the UK club scene, the way that it can be both really grungy and underground and a bit messy, but also attract some of the biggest names. And he talks about, you know, clubbing with people like Amy Winehouse and Kelly Osbourne and a few other people, as well as some really huge starlets and Hollywood types around the time. But what becomes very quickly apparent in this book is Jodie as Jay talking about his struggles with addiction, and particularly the sort of drink and drugs of the club scene. And so we get the sense very early on that things are very quickly slipping out of control for Jodie and for Jay. And this is the sort of moment where, you know, he's out every night partying and clubbing and whatever, gets to a point where, as Jodie, as the sort of drag persona, is really this sort of queen of the club scene, but at the same time is almost, you know, almost has no money left because it's been spent on various other things, you know, drugs and drink and whatever else. And, you know, he feels really out of control, feels like so much is not particularly going well in his life. And there are just these moments towards the end, particularly of looking at what sobriety now looks like for Jodie and for Jay. And so, yeah, I found it really fascinating as a memoir. And I love memoirs like this, where it's kind of like with Martin Sherman's book as well. It's an entryway into a scene or a sort of world that you don't necessarily always see much. So, you know, I don't know enough about the ins and outs of the club scene or of 1960s and 70s theatre, you know, like, but these are really interesting memoirs of the ways that people found their identity throughout that and became these big fixtures in their respective scenes, but also had to leave behind quite a lot, or to have quite a few difficult moments in order to get there. And last but not least, Richard Osman with the Thursday Murder Club, a very, very different feel from the previous two books. So I sometimes have a bit of a thing with celebrity authors where I'm sometimes a bit nervous and a bit skeptical of some of them. Not always because of necessarily of the quality, but I think that sometimes there's something where I maybe find it difficult to disentangle my idea of the person from and their sense of celebrity away from the book as well. But the Thursday Murder Club, particularly because there's a film version either out already or coming up soon, I can't remember. I think it's out. And there's a bit more buzz about the books, and I was like, fine, I'll do this, you know, I'll finally get round to reading them. And I found this really beautifully done. I don't really read many mysteries or sort of thrillers or things like that. But this was a really cozy version of that I greatly enjoyed, where even though I didn't, you know, it's solving a murder, I actually was less interested in the murder part. I was just in love with the characters. The idea, for people who have not read it, is that there's a group of, I think mostly about 4, but there are lots of other characters who come in and out. People who are in a retirement home, and they form a murder solving club. They spend their time every Thursday, hence the title, solving murder cases that haven't been closed yet. And they essentially pool all of their resources together and try to do it. But what comes out is the most quaintly British and sort of silly and absurd and lovely form of cozy crime. It feels very much like watching an episode of something like Murder, She Wrote or Midsummer Murders or whatever, where there is a real sense of trying to solve the crime, but also the characters are a big part of this, and we want to spend a lot of time with them, kind of the Miss Marple, the sort of whatever of the world. But I just really fell in love with these people. There's a character, particularly Joyce, who I loved. She is this older woman who is constantly baking various cakes, but there's something interesting I think about her. She's sort of underrated. She's able to pass into various places because people assume she's a sweet old grandma just making some cakes, but often she sees or hears things that nobody else has caught, and is trusted with information that other people haven't. There's somebody who's an ex-spy or kind of worked in various places abroad and kind of has that skill set. Loads of other things going on in this. So I just really greatly enjoyed this in a way that I absolutely did not expect to. I thought it'd be fun and enjoyable, but I was hooked. I really liked the characters. I thought the fact that they're solving this case of various murders, a couple of murders that basically appear in the book, particularly around inheritance and money and all the other big tropey things of it. I thought, you know, kind of classic crime story there, but it's done with such love and tenderness. There's an interview at the end of this. I listened to the audiobook between Richard Osman and Marion Keyes, and it's interesting hearing them both speak, because a big part of what Richard Osman says in this is that he wanted to write a book that he himself would want to read, not just a cash grab, not just a whatever. And actually it reads like that for me. It reads like a book that has a lot of love in it as well. So yeah, hopefully I might carry on reading more of them, because I just really greatly enjoyed what was happening here. So those are the books that I've been reading this week. I hope you're doing really well. Take care and speak to you soon. We should very soon have the Booker shortlist, not a few days after this, on the 23rd. So that is to come, and I will be talking about that. I will be on holiday when it is actually, I'll be basically on a plane when it's announced, but I will, a couple of days later or whenever I can, try to react to the shortlist as well. Take care and speak to you all soon. Bye-bye.